Welcome to Gold Coast Insider, where we bring you business insights, stories, opportunities, and forecasts from movers and shakers across the Gold Coast. I'm your host, Estella Rodiguero. I'm CEO of Regional Development Australia Gold Coast. It's my pleasure to welcome and introduce Dr. Chris Davis. Chris is General Manager of Griffith University's Institute for Glycomics right here on the Gold Coast. The Institute is absolutely foundational to our booming local biotech industry. They have a team of researchers inventing and developing new drugs and vaccines, taking them right up to clinical trials and then commercialisation. Chris obtained his PhD from the Institute in 2006 before he launched his career in the private biotech sector, negotiating technology deals with pharmaceutical and biotech companies globally. In 2009, he returned to the Institute as General Manager, where he leads a group of professionals dedicated to the strategic and operational development of the Institute, covering domestic and international business strategy, technology commercialisation, and general Institute operations. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Estella. I'm really glad to be here.
Okay, Chris, so let's start off with, in 2009, you came back to the Institute for Glycomics. The Glycomics Institute was established back in 2000. So do you want to talk us through the evolution and what's transpired during that time from your beginning until now?
Yeah, thanks, Estella. I'd love to. It's been an interesting story, I think, because if we go back to the year 2000, when I was doing my honours and PhD, there really was not an industry, a medical technologies and pharmaceutical industry on the Gold Coast. And you fast forward 2 decades and now we have a thriving medical technologies and pharmaceutical industry right here on the Gold Coast. And the story over that time is actually really interesting. And I'm really happy to share it with you today. So way back then in the year 2000, if you looked across the Gold Coast, there really wasn't a lot of R&D going on in the medical technology and pharmaceutical space, nor was there really any industry here whatsoever. I, at that point in time, and just to finish an undergraduate degree, majoring in pharmaceutical chemistry, really at that point, not knowing where to go in industry. And I was pointed, actually, I was doing that up in Brisbane at Griffith University, and I was pointed down to the Gold Coast where a gentleman, Professor Mark von Ichstein, was just beginning to establish an institute here on the Gold Coast, the Institute for Glycomics. And that's when I met Mark. We discussed a research project, and I began my journey in research and development in drug and vaccines. It's been an interesting journey over that time. I was able to complete a PhD. We're also able to commercialise drug candidates that came out of my PhD program through a company. That company was eventually trade sold, but that experience had a major impact on my career. I moved then from Griffith University within that company at the time, which was a startup company with licensed IP from Griffith University, to a Brisbane-based company to commercialise technologies from multiple universities around Australia, but with a focus on drugs and vaccines once again. Coming back to Griffith University's Institute for Glycomics in 2009, the idea there was that with the director of the Institute, that we really transformed the Institute into one that's not just translational, which means discovering drugs and vaccine candidates, but actually developing those and taking those technologies right through to human clinical trials. And that was our ambition, to be able to translate drug and vaccine technologies, discover them, invent them here on the Gold Coast, but then try and develop them right the way through to phase 1 human clinical trials. So translation was one aspect. The other aspect was commercialization, making sure that we partner with global pharmaceutical and biotech companies to take these technologies out to market. There's no good in inventing a technology if it doesn't become a product on the shelf. And that has been our agenda for the last 13 years that I've been back at the Institute for Glycomics as the general manager. Today, we actually have built a team now around commercialization of the technologies that we invent here at the Institute for Glycomics. And we have multiple examples of technologies that have come out of here that we've taken through and partnered with industry. But I think more broadly, looking from a industry perspective on the Gold Coast, looking at how the industry looks today, it's so remarkably different to what it was those 20 years ago. And it's been absolutely humbling to have such a role in helping to develop the Gold Coast industry to the point that it's at today. That brings in multiple partners that have helped to develop the industry, and I might be able to touch on a few of those in a moment. But that really has been the journey from the Institute's inception back in 2000 right through to today, where we're actually now translating technologies, drugs and vaccines that have been invented here on the Gold Coast through to human clinical trials and then commercialising those.
Oh, it's brilliant. About 3 years ago, the RDA ran a project called the Gold Coast Biomedical Supply Chain Project. And that was amazing, because we had this whole industry that was relatively unknown, but it was an amazing growing industry or sector. And out of that, it was highlighted that the Gold Coast is the largest regional city in the country for the delivery of clinical trials. And not only that, it's experiencing a rapid growth at 32%. And they say that growth will, over the next 5 years, will far exceed the national average, in line with it being a massive emerging industry on the Gold Coast. So you must have, and I think that was just in clinical trials, but that was just a part of the story. That is just part of the story, isn't it, Chris? So, where do we go from there? It's amazing.
Absolutely. In developing a medical technologies and pharmaceutical industry, you've got to start somewhere, and that's exactly what happened back in 2000. We started by, developing new drug and vaccine technologies and helping to grow a culture of developing and commercialising technologies here on the Gold Coast. That translational pathway from inventing a new drug or vaccine candidate through to running human clinical trials to test how that vaccine or drug candidate actually works in humans. Mm-hmm. That pathway then has led to the opening of many opportunities for subsets of the industry. And one of those subsets of the industry is clinical trials. And as you pointed out, the growth of clinical trials on the Gold Coast over the last 4, 5, 6 years has just been phenomenal. So, even from our perspective, if we look at the technologies, some of the ones that we've developed in the last 5 years, we've invented 2 drugs and 2 vaccines that have gone right the way through to human clinical trials. That's just out of our institute. You then look at from around the world how the Gold Coast has attracted clinical trials of technologies, not just that we've invented, but that other companies and other academic organisations around the world have invented and have chosen the Gold Coast as their site to actually run their clinical trial on their technology. And there's multiple examples of that, from small organisations right through to multinationals who have run vaccine clinical trials here on the Gold Coast from phase 1 right through to phase 3. And so that subset of the medical technology and pharmaceutical industry, being clinical trials, is actually a massively valuable one for Australia. It's not just the Gold Coast; it's actually all of Australia. But the Gold Coast has absolutely exceeded in this area.
And the figures I just said, that 32% growth, that was pre the pandemic. Has the pandemic accentuated, has that grown even more rapidly? Has that impacted on the industry more so or not?
Yeah, absolutely, because the number of vaccine candidates that were coming out at around probably a year after the pandemic began, after technologies that were being developed at a really rapid rate, a lot of those technologies were being tested in Australia by clinical trials organisations in Australia. And I know for a fact that some of those have been tested right here on the Gold Coast. And so, yes, the increase in clinical trial demand here on the Gold Coast was real during the pandemic, and it continues too. That hasn't stopped.
Okay. And so you were saying, and rightly so, the global reputation for clinical trial excellence has made Australia the go-to destination for companies wanting to conduct clinical trials, so much so that it's now became and developed as the country's most important and valuable service export, and generates more export revenue than construction, intellectual property charges and government services. So it is just a massive growing industry, and our part on the Gold Coast is a very vital part of that industry, and certainly for the Gold Coast it's a vital part.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I think that will just continue to grow. I think what helps to continue to support and drive the industry are the multiple partners that we have on the Gold Coast who are all looking in the right direction with respect to making this emerging industry a leading industry for the Gold Coast. For example, the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct Office, who is doing an amazing job to connect all of the precinct partners. Those precinct partners are the hospitals. So we've got the Gold Coast University Hospital, Gold Coast Private Hospital. We've also got the local universities, we've got state government, and we've got local government. And those partners are critical in making sure that the vision of the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct remains pure in wanting to actually create this as an emerging industry for the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct Office, their job is to be the connector and builder of investment into the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct. You've then got state government through EDQ, and they have oversight of the development of the precinct, and them working closely with the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct and the university and the hospital and the local government. That's another critical element in making sure that the industry on the Gold Coast thrives. Mm. Now, I might, for a moment, just come back to what the industry looks like today, really just to give people a picture of, okay, we came from a place 2 decades ago where there really were no companies in this space at all. There was really not any R&D. There wasn't really a supply chain in our industry either. Whereas if we move forward to today, even just in the last year or two, there's multiple companies that are emerging from the Gold Coast. And there's some local ones like Biocentric, which has recently been established, private company here on the Gold Coast. They're looking at GMP manufacture of multiple nutraceutical products. We've got Proronata, who's been recently established on the Gold Coast, and they're looking at ways to formulate and new technologies to formulate vaccines and other and delivery of other drugs. And they're, once again, a really new company based right here on the Gold Coast. You've got BioAZ, who are looking at biotechnology ways of introducing probiotics into foods and into other nutritional products. Once again, based right here on the Gold Coast. On that point, I would like to acknowledge also the fact that we have Cohort here on the Gold Coast, and Cohort is a co-working space. And this was an excellent initiative, actually, that was developed on the Gold Coast and actually utilises the space that was provided from the outgoing 2018 Commonwealth Games. Cohort co-working spaces actually houses a multitude of companies now. I think they've got over 40 companies in-house, and several of those companies have run through the Cohort Lumina X program. Now, Lumina X is an accelerator for new companies, giving those companies the tools and information they need to be successful startups growing into small and medium enterprises here on the Gold Coast. BioAZ, the company that I just spoke about, is one of those companies that's run through that accelerator program, and they're actually now located here with multiple staff on the Health and Knowledge Precinct. So they're a company that have grown very quickly here on the Gold Coast. I'm going to touch on one more, and this company is relevant to the Gold Coast and also more broadly Southeast Queensland, but a deal that was recently announced just before Christmas. We now have a direct connection with a multinational company, Sanofi. So Sanofi is a global vaccine company who you will know their name, and they are planting an R&D site here in Southeast Queensland. And that's an initiative between Griffith University, University of Queensland, Queensland State Government and Sanofi that will be transformational for our region. Oh, and so I'm really excited that we have this opportunity to have Sanofi here on site. So that's a fantastic outcome for us. And they'll be focused on, among other things, new medicines based around RNA technology, but a whole lot of other things as well.
Because that's so exciting. I mean, the industry is just massive, isn't it? And the international companies here and national companies that are now recognising this as being one of the key places to come and do business and engage with is just brilliant, and a credit to everyone engaged, as you say. But it does raise an interesting conversation, and one I'd like to talk to you about, and that's about the staffing and skills that will be required moving forward into into the industry. So where is that sitting now? Are there any shortages? What's happening in that industry?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. I'm going to step back once again to the year 2000. Back then, I had no opportunity personally to basically have a career here on the Gold Coast. Today, there is so much opportunity for students coming out of school to do a university degree, to then go on and do postgraduate studies and move straight into a job here on the Gold Coast. So that's the difference today. I'm going to tackle this from the top end first. So we talked about new companies and new commercial opportunities here on the Gold Coast. One that is a really prime example of something that's absolutely exceptional out of the Gold Coast is the new initiative from Dr. Hal Rice and his offsider Letitia de Villiers, who have actually established an interventional neuroradiology training centre. And that centre will train the best of the best surgeons around the world. So that training opportunity, not just for Gold Coasters and those that are moving into that industry on the Gold Coast, but from around the world. And that facility is now established, and that facility will attract that international reputation to the Gold Coast. So quite phenomenal. So that in itself is a career opportunity for any aspiring surgeons or kids coming through school that want to be a surgeon and ultimately end up in interventional neuroradiology. So that in itself is a great opportunity. But if we look to the pathway for students and basically their education opportunity and also the career opportunity on the Gold Coast, it's absolutely transformed from even a decade ago. So today the opportunity is that kids can come out of school. They can go to university and do an undergraduate degree in science, in biomedicine, in medicine. They can move from there into a PhD if they wish, or they may want to go from there straight into companies, and I'll come to the companies in a moment. If they choose to go straight into those companies, they can do that as a technical person. And so as a technical assistant in those companies, or they might even choose to move into the more professional world of those companies. So looking at business development or what have you. The alternative is to go into a PhD, which is now can be done here on the Gold Coast. And for example, our institute has 50 PhD students at any one point in time. So we're training 50 PhD students at any one point in time in R&D, in drug and vaccine development. From there, they can then step into any of the number of companies that I've mentioned already today. So moving into R&D, so R&D positions in companies, whether it be the opportunity perhaps one day to be a Sanofi team member or in a startup with one of the companies that I mentioned, whether it be in probiotics or nutraceutical development or drug and vaccine development in startup companies. So that's the opportunity for kids going through school today and something that they can aspire to in their career. The other option is to be full-time researchers in a university, and that is available to them as well. So I think career-wise, it really, as I say, the landscape's completely transformed to what it looked like just a handful of years ago. To one now that's actually really a solid, robust industry where they can expect to stay on the Gold Coast and have a career.
The coordination between the industry and the university is a very important one, isn't it, moving forward? We've got great universities on this coast, and that industry connection is vital moving forward, I think.
It is vital, and I think that is what will make the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct work. That the industry engagement between the universities and the companies that we're establishing here on the Gold Coast and the ones that we're engaging with here in Queensland, but globally, are critical to providing that career path for younger people.
Absolutely. So, gosh, it's very exciting. It's exciting, and it's an opportunity for now that kids who are born here and raised here and gone to school here can go to university here, and they can get a really incredible career here. And that's really what we're not after, bringing people in to fill jobs. We're about growing our population into the roles that are coming up, and they're exciting roles. So I want to move on a little bit. So what do you see, and this can be a generalised question to you, I don't mind which way you go, what do you see as the challenges? And then I want to know what the opportunities are here on the Gold Coast. And, just ballpark it, whatever you think.
Sure. So I think the Gold Coast as a destination for, a really strong industry in medical technologies and pharmaceuticals was always looked at one that was a little bit remote from the supply chain and what have you, but that's changed substantially. We've already touched on clinical trials. That aspect of the supply chain has almost been completely filled now. But there is great opportunity for growth. We know it's going to grow, and that opportunity for growth is available there through the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct. So something that was once viewed as something that was really a challenge for the Gold Coast in not having a really complete supply chain, those gaps are now being filled in a really strong way. I think if we look at, what I think is the future of the Gold Coast in this industry, and I think the way it's heading, and the way to really to plug all of those remaining gaps in the supply chain to really build out our industry, the secret, I think, is around establishing new companies here on the Gold Coast where we can create a full ecosystem for our industry. So by that, I mean, I've already touched on a couple of companies that have been established. But if we look at a lot of the way that technology is being commercialized out of our region, it's typically been direct deals with pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies, both globally and domestically. So in a lot of cases, because they're deals that have been done globally and a couple domestically, those technologies have basically gone out to those particular companies. Now, that's not a bad thing necessarily, because a lot of the R&D dollar that to develop those technologies comes back into the Gold Coast. But the thing is that if you can spin a new company out or start a new company up and put that technology into that company and incubate it here on the Gold Coast for a longer period of time, then you start to build a really robust supply chain here on the Gold Coast. Demand is then created for all of these bits in the supply chain that we need to really fill out the industry. I guess that's what I see as the future of the Gold Coast, is establishing new companies on the Gold Coast, so we don't always have to do deals offshore, at least for as long as we can. Keep those companies in Australia developing Australian technology for here as long as we possibly can. And that will grow the industry enormously.
And you think we've reached that level of maturity or level of demand that we can now start researching and looking into what those companies could look like, what they could what is the supply chain that they can develop for it?
Yep, absolutely, and that work is actually starting now. So it's not something that is pie in the sky, something that we're hoping for. It's actually something that is beginning now, and so that's why I say I really see that as the future of the Gold Coast and really in this industry.
Oh, that's so good! It's great news, great industry. Like the growth is just exciting. So just to finish up. Why are you so passionate? You're very passionate about the Gold Coast. You put a lot of work and effort into your job and into the Gold Coast. What is it about the Gold Coast for you that keeps you absolutely passionate and going?
Yeah, no, fantastic question. I've been on the Gold Coast nearly all of my life, most of my life, and look, the idea of the Gold Coast having a thriving biotech hub or medical technology and pharmaceutical hub is one that you could never have fathomed going back 2 decades ago. But today, it's actually a possibility. The opportunity to have an amazing career with a fantastic lifestyle, where else do you find that in the world, actually? And so, that is the opportunity. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about it. I was given an opportunity 20 years ago to do a PhD here, and I've been lucky enough to have a career here on the Gold Coast. I want to be able to help to provide that opportunity for others on the Gold Coast who want to stay here and help build that industry. That's what makes me so passionate.
That's good. Thank you very much, Chris. It's been wonderful speaking with you, and I'm sure we will speak once again. Thanks for listening today. For a complete list of podcast episodes and transcripts, go to rdagoldcoast.org.au/podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter.